This is Logan Lanier with Specs Weekly. Dr. Ossian Sweet moved here in September 1925. The ensuing weeks and months after he moved here changed the rights of the sanctity of the American home and civil rights forever.
Ossian Sweet was an African-American physician in Detroit, Michigan. He is known for being charged with murder in 1925 after he and his friends used armed self-defense against a hostile white mob protesting after Sweet moved into their neighborhood. Born in Florida to a farming family, Sweet went to Wilberforce College for preparatory work and his undergraduate degree. He earned his medical degree from Howard University, also a historically black university. In July 1919, Sweet was attending Howard University when he witnessed the Washington, D.C. race riot. The capital was among 20 cities that had outbreaks of racial violence in the so-called Red Summer of 1919. These resulted from post-war social tensions and competition for jobs and housing as World War I veterans returned home. For safety, Sweet and his classmates stayed in their fraternity house 4 blocks from one area fighting on 8th Street Northeast. He and his fraternity brothers were afraid to go out. Earlier, while walking down the street, he had seen a white gang stop a passing streetcar, pull a black passenger to the sidewalk, and beat him. This sight stayed with him all of his life. After completing his medical degree, Sweet moved to Detroit, Michigan in the late summer of 1921. He had difficulty finding work at a hospital due to his race, and he worked during the summers at Detroit restaurants. He could see the residents of Black Bottom, a neighborhood consisting of mainly working-class black families, urgently needed medical care. Sweet married Gladys Mitchell in 1922. Born in Pittsburgh, she grew up in Detroit, a few miles north of Garland Street. She came from a prominent middle-class black family. In 1923, Sweet temporarily left his practice for further medical studies in Vienna and Paris. By June 21, 1924, the Sweets returned to Detroit. Sweet became affiliated with Dunbar Hospital, Detroit's first hospital founded to serve the black community. According to Boyle, Sweet earned the respect of his colleagues at Dunbar. Having saved enough money, he purchased a house at 2905 Garland Street in an all-white neighborhood. Sweet liked the appearance and size of the house and what its location represented as a good neighborhood. Most African Americans in Detroit still lived in Black Bottom, but those who prospered moved to better neighborhoods, which Sweet wanted for his own family. Sweet was aware that many white residents in the area were prejudiced against blacks. Because of a confrontation with these neighbors on the night of September 9, 1925, Police Inspector Norton Schumneck and a detail of officers were assigned outside the Sweet house to keep the peace. Sweet arranged privately for family and friends to help defend his home if needed. When a hostile crowd formed for the second consecutive night in front of his home, Sweet felt that somewhere out there, standing among the women and children, lounging on the porches, lurking in the alleys, were the men who would incite the crowd to violence. As the crowd grew restless, they threw stones at the house, eventually breaking an upstairs window. Several of Sweet's friends were armed with guns and had taken positions upstairs. Someone fired from the house, hitting 2 white men. Eric Holberg was wounded in the leg. Leon Breener, who had been simply watching the events from a porch on Garland Street, was killed. The 11 African Americans in the house were later taken to police headquarters, where they were questioned for 5 hours. All were arrested for murder and continued interrogations. Although Glad Sweet was released in early October on bail, the men were held at the Wayne County Jail until the trial was over. The Sweets and their friends and family were tried for murder before Frank Murphy, who many consider to be one of the more progressive judges in the city. With the media working the city into a frenzy, Murphy denied the defendant's appeal to have the case dismissed. But Sweet and the other accused parties remained hopeful. When word of the mass arrest reached James Weldon Johnson, General Secretary of the NAACP, he correctly predicted that the case could affect the civil rights struggle for African Americans. In early October, the NAACP invited Clarence Darrow to join the Sweets defense team. They expected that Darrow's national reputation as one of the most brilliant defense attorneys in the United States would attract desired publicity to the trial and its issues. Darrow accepted, and on October 15th, the NAACP announced he will be taking control of the defense. By the time of the trial, charges had been dropped against 3 of the original 11 defendants. On the morning of Friday, October 30th, Clarence Darrow was ready for trial. An all-white jury was seated. By the end of November and after long deliberations, most members of the jury came to an agreement that the 8 remaining defendants should be acquitted. There were, however, a few holdouts. At this point, Judge Murphy dismissed the hung jury and declared a mistrial. Sweet and Gladys expected to head back to court within a few weeks, but there were delays. By mid-1928, Sweet finally regained possession of his house, which had been vacant since the shooting. A few months after his wife Gladys returned home, she died of tuberculosis at the age of 27. After her death, Sweet bought Garfalio's drugstore. In 1929, he left his practice to run a hospital in the heart of the black community. He eventually operated a few of these small hospitals, but none ever flourished financially. On March 20th, 1960, he committed suicide in his bedroom with a gunshot to the head. Sweet's life and his trial for murder have been memorialized as important events in the civil rights movement.
Dr. Ossian Sweet is now a civil rights pioneer. His house is now a renovation project, and it's a historical marker. For Specs Weekly, I'm Logan Lanier.